And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, meteorologist Joel Curtis with your marine weather forecast issued Tuesday, September 23rd. Starting out with a sea ice edge, our sea ice minimum was on September 10th. And the ice forecasters told me this afternoon that they're just now starting to see a little bit of growth on the ice pack. For our satellite image, we've got a couple of systems developing. One it's actually weakening in the eastern Bering Sea, and it's going to transfer its energy to a developing low that's right at Kodiak Island right now. And so by Wednesday, that low will have developed and then weakened a couple of millibars to about 984 millibars. And there are thunderstorms with the occluded front around that low. So it's gale force coming up to the coast, and also gales are trailing the system as well, as we will see in the forecast. By Thursday, that system weakens to 988 millibars, and a couple of lows are spawning to the south of that. Then also there's another low up in Canada that's joined to it. And then there's also a developing system in the Gulf of Anadyr, just a little under 1,000 millibars. And there's a couple of fronts associated with that, and that's moving down. And by Friday, we're going to see a real rip snorter low, storm force, moving up into southeast Alaska. So please start thinking about that. It's a likely situation, and there will be a very large sea state as well as some really strong storm force winds. So, taking a look at southeast Alaska for Wednesday. On the inside waters, we've got winds 25 to 30 knots out of the south or southeast, but notice some really big gusts, and that's that system that's moving up to the coast. On the outside waters, winds ranging from 35 to 40 knots and seas up to 17 feet. And then for Thursday, the seas are going to remain really high on the outside, up to 14 feet, and then but 20 to 25 knots on the outside. And then on the inside waters, a blustery 20 knots, some gusts of 35 in some of the areas, and the maximum seas will see about 6 feet or so. For Wednesday, for South Central, we've got a whole gale off of Middleton Island, southeast 45 knots, seas 14 feet. Otherwise, 40 to 35 knots in a lot of areas, including Prince William Sound and Lower Cook Inlet. Seas up to 13 feet in the other areas on the outside, and then 30 to 40 knots in Cook Inlet, and seas building up to 11 feet as you get down by Augustine Island. And then on Thursday, things back off. It's still small craft advisory in a lot of spots. 25 knots, generally easterlies to northeasterlies, except for a northwest wind coming out of Kennedy Entrance, small craft advisory, 25 knots, seas 6 feet. And then in Cook Inlet, 15 to 20 knots, seas up to about 6 feet as you get down the middle part of the Kenai Peninsula. So for Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, starting out, we've got a whole gale, 45 knot westerlies, just south of Coal Bay and Sand Point. Seas up to 18 feet, so plenty of fetch with that. Otherwise, it backs off as you go up toward Chillicothe Strait with about 20 knots up there. 40 knots northeast of Coal Bay, and seas 22 feet with a really long fetch there. And backing off to about 20 knots as you get up to Bristol Bay, seas 7 feet. So for Thursday, we've got just about everywhere it's got a westerly component of the wind, mostly northwesterly, and 25 to 30 knots. Any place where you have a fetch distance, seas up to about 12 feet or so on the Bering side. But without that fetch on the Pacific side, we've got 8 to about 5 feet. And then for the Aleutian chain, again, that whole gale in the east, But as you get further out the chain, about 25 to 30 knots, small craft advisory, but plenty of sea, because that low that went ripping by there generated a pretty good swell. Seas up to 41 feet for 21 feet off of Nikolsky, for example. A little bit less sea on the Pacific side. And then for Thursday, the winds start to die down as all of that energy takes over in the Gulf of Alaska. So for the eastern sections, small craft, 25 to 30 knots, seas up to about 11 feet. But then as you go farther west, you're going to still see 20 to 25 knot small craft advisory with fairly large seas. But wait for it, because there's more weather systems coming. This is a very, very active weather pattern we've got. So for the west coast, a lot of northeasterlies blowing offshore, 20 to 25 knots, 30 knots out by St. Matthew, and for the Pribilofs, seas up to 18 feet for the Pribilofs where they have a fetch. Otherwise, not a whole lot too big sea, so up to 7 feet as you get down off of the Kuskokwim Bay. And then for Thursday, winds back off further north. For example, Norton Sound, northerlies 15 knots, seas 3 feet. But you've still got those westerlies in the south part following the big low that's going into the Gulf of Alaska. And so westerlies 30 to 35 knots, 25 knot northerlies in Bristol Bay, and then seas up to about 12 feet where there's a good fetch. So for the Arctic coast, starting out with the North Slope, 5 to 15 knots on Wednesday, seas 2 to 3 feet. But then as you go down to the Bering Strait, winds 10 to 15 knots. And then as you get a little bit further south, you can see those 20s starting to click in. And then for Thursday's forecast, 10 to 15 knots westerlies all along the Arctic coast. And then 10 knots as you get down toward the Bering Strait, and then 15 knots south of the Bering Strait. So that's it for your marine forecast. Please remember to file a float plan and stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in.